which has a couple of citizens who are questioning their identity. So it is a bunch of stories which are connected to each other in multiple ways. But yes, I think all the things we have spoken about are some of the underlying things which permeate it, which at least to me, in my humble opinion, is what literature ought to be doing, right? It should be telling stories which we can relate to as human beings, but it should also be posing questions also.
And literature should not be put down and condensed into a tweet like you just did. 140 characters for every...
Well, I've started using Twitter, so...
Yeah, which is sad because Osama has really written a vast book.
It's an amazing book, actually.
It's an amazing book.
It's a huge scale.
When you open it up, don't be in a hurry to finish it. Don't be in a hurry to understand everything. Don't be frustrated about, why did I, stop? Why did this character stop here? And when do I get to meet this character again? Down, a couple of chapters. Stay with the book, and it will stay with you, because you will be reminded throughout your day, every day. Oh, this seems to resonate with me because it's coming from what I've read in Osama's fiction. I really can't emphasize enough how the world that we're living in is that he has shown as a future of where Earth might go. It's already here. It's happening. We do have a water conglomerate happening, as Osama has described it. There is the question that the wars that are going on right now, whether they're in Iraq or in Sudan, are they about oil, or are they actually about the water resources? Golan Heights in the West Bank. Golan Heights, why is that so important? Well, that's a water resource. And the biggest thing between Israel and Palestine is Israelis use 4 times as much water than Palestinians do. And they are celebrated for their trickle irrigation. That's bullshit. Excuse me, that's French. But that's nonsense. It's all about water. They say that the invasion of Iraq was really not about the oil in Basra. It was the huge lake sitting in Kirkuk, or somewhere in that region. The huge lake, which is a huge water resource that irrigates both Iran and on this side Iraq and all the way into Israel. So we really cannot overemphasize the importance of this resource and what we are doing to it. We'll all be running to the forest soon. And before we do that, we should be running to the forest with Osama's characters.
I just want to say one more thing. I love the attention to detail in this book. The way he describes the flowers, the trees, the moonlight, bricks, buildings, spires. He's got everything. And so one very vivid image that haunts me is that in the beginning, the Mohenjo-daro, he's actually got a girl who stands in the position of the dancing girl, and later there's a story about what the dancing girl statue that we see. But it's this kind of honing in on details that makes this narrative so alive.
Yes, I agree, Maniza. There are moments in this novel that are so beautiful. The gift that Rita gives to this love of his life, I won't give it away what that gift is. You have to read this book to see what an ephemeral, ethereal gift he gives to this woman that he's in love with, one of the characters. And that image will stay with me for a very long time. I think that Maniza is also referring to that maybe.
What can I say? Thank you.
I think so. We should wind up. I think so.
Thank you so much. I mean, I guess the biggest boon for a writer is that if you're able to find readers who have actually engaged with it, who actually explored the vistas, and oftentimes I have this incredibly pleasant experience where someone gives me an insight or someone reads language which is ultimately open textured in a certain way or finds a nuance. And I think that's what keeps books going, and that's what keeps us going, because writing, as those of us who write know, is an incredibly lonely and incredibly at times seemingly pointless exercise, right?
How could you have been lonely? You've got like, how many characters do you have?
Those are there, but you know, when you start talking to yourself, people in the family get worried. So you do need human interaction. But I think one other sort of small little thing which is very close to my heart, which is what I've done after the book came out, is that I think we all realize the incredible crisis we face in terms of the younger generation, or at least our perception is that they don't read as much. I mean, and for a lot of people it's simply affordability, right? But I think we don't put a premium on writing and things like that. So one of the things which I've enjoyed the most is, and very heartening, is that I got invited to a lot of universities. And especially I was very excited to go to public sector universities or the lesser known private universities. And I was overwhelmed. I mean, it really energized me because, look, in my everyday life I deal with judges and lawyers. So you can imagine how invigorating that must be. But meeting these younger faculty members, graduate students, and them asking really perceptive questions or engaging with the book or making interesting connections with history, politics and literature, that gives me hope that there is a huge underexplored sort of potential out there in terms of readership and discourses. And frankly, we don't have a choice. I mean, if you want to really salvage the situation, we have to deepen the discourse, we have to broaden it, we have to make books primary rather than, you know, television programs play a role, but I think far too much of our discourse is sort of hijacked by relatively inane bickering over what one politician said or the other. And we need to really sort of now start talking about ideas in books. And so in that sense, you know, I can only make a humble contribution in terms of one other book being part of a vast sort of reservoir. But I think we all need to play this role to constantly promote reading books. And that's what this is all about.
Are you writing another novel?
I am.
We'll look forward to it.
Thank you so much. Sorry, go ahead. I mean, I didn't realize we didn't have time. Please go ahead.
We're bringing a mic. We're bringing a mic.
The way you have divided your book into chapters, like, you know, you're taking a historical perspective, but is it a critique of power? Because, you know, like in Foucauldian terms also we talk about, you know, history not really helping us understand how power was exercised. So are you really critiquing power or the manifestation of it through these periods?
I think Foucault is very much there, has to be. Foucault is someone I teach. My own sort of analysis of colonial legal project is also one sort of aspect of his very Foucauldian. So yeah, I mean, I think this entire sort of tendency to classify, to categorize, to normalize, to divide, is there, right? So, I mean, that's where I ask the question, are we evolving? Are we really changing fundamentally? And I guess the question is also there, can we? So one thing which I deal with here, apart from power, is also the notion of evil, which fascinates me, right? So there's the external notion of the Satan, there's the Satan within. And my Buddhist period sort of narrative deals a lot with that, because I got fascinated as I started reading about Mara and all these other notions of evil and temptation in Buddhism. And I think it's a fundamental question, because I've tried to pose, without giving too much away, some examples of there being evil without any justification whatsoever. You know, so, and that's something which bothers me. There are latest studies which are saying that you can detect as early as in a child 2 to 3 year old psychopathic tendencies, right? So that, what happens then? What happened to innocence? What's destiny? If there are people who are going to be inclined in a certain anti-social way, that throws everything out of the window in terms of how we classify good and evil, right?
So you do agree with Foucault that history doesn't help in understanding the manifestations of power?
So the biggest challenge there, I mean, I'm sort of slightly propounding a different thing, because we are so ahistorical that we haven't even graduated to that stage where we are asking that question. I mean, we don't even know things which happen. I mean, we seem to welcome every military dictator That's our knowledge of history. So I think we need to get attuned to history first of all, but then there's a larger philosophical question. History is also problematic also because who's writing it? And that's a question I pose. So, I mean, I'm actually speculating here how future history is being written, which will very much depict us as certain kinds of people or certain kind of era. So history writing has so much to do with power that's where I agree with Foucault. But at another level, ahistoricity is a different and separate problem which needs to be addressed, right?
I think that's a whole different session. Yeah. We have a question here.
Hello, my name is Fatma Siraj, and my question is that you briefly mentioned your interest in the ruins, and it's almost impossible to ignore the myriad of mounds that are lined in Sindh and Balochistan, and when you go there, there are pottery shards that complain of an existence long forgotten. They seem to be neglected, abandoned sites. At the same time, when you go and speak to the local villages surrounding the mounds, there's a mythological landscape that surrounds it, and we can see how this there's a socio-political almost which is ignored, and it's guiding their spiritual and everyday life. And I just wanted to know your perspective on how do you think it tells us more about the modern man, and if so, what does it tell about us and the way that modernity has affected these places and our interaction with them?
So that's a good question, and various facets to it. I'll try and be brief. I mean, modernity is so many different things depending on where you're looking at, right? So there are modern states these days who really preserve and catalog everything about history. How they interpret it is, of course, a political process, and there's variation. But I think you raise another important point, which is about mythology, which is another good example of how history lives through us, right? So how we define ourselves, what our aims and goals in life are, how we judge human actions, is very much also by, the mythology of a place. So history does not just travel through written documentation or artifacts, it's also the stories which have been built around them. And yes, it tells a lot about who we are and how we are evolving, and to the extent that we also ignore that, one very sort of fundamental characteristic of a lot of human civilizations is that they think they're unique. They're facing certain predicaments for the very first time. Either that, or that they are the anointed ones, they are special. So the big story is that there have been lots of special people before, and we don't even have a pottery shard to tell us about them. So this sense of omnipotence which human beings have. And at the same time, I am also fascinated by this human spirit, because if we did not have this sense of being able to conquer everything, we would not have planes flying overhead. So it's a very complex existence, right? How do you strike a balance between humility, perspective, learning from history, and at the same time, how do you think also that we are in God's image and we can do things which no one has done before? What will happen tomorrow? Blade Runner in popular culture is a very good example, and it intrigues me, of when human beings create non-human entities which are sentient. What kind of moral dilemmas arise then? Already, I think you asked this question earlier, modernity about cloning, about genetic manipulation, about controlling what kind of children are born tomorrow, are raising questions which are completely unique today. So in some ways, yes, we are changing. And in some ways, we are exactly the same pathetic lot that we've always been.
I think we
On
should.
that very happy note, so we can just say, go and get the book, read it for yourself, and we'll see what we mean.
Thank you all.
Thank you.